I'm Megan Munsie and I head up the Ethics, Engagement and Policy Division of Stem Cells Australia. Stem Cells Australia is an ARC funded special research initiative where we look at how to control and harness the potential of stem cells. So at the University of Melbourne, I'm involved in a lab. I run my own lab where we're looking at the ethical, legal and social issues associated with stem cell science. And I also teach into courses across the university, including law, medicine, engineering and science. So stem cell research involves trying to understand how the body grows and develops, what goes wrong in disease, and whether we can isolate replacement cells in the lab that we put back into patients to help them overcome diseases and illnesses. So you might be familiar with, I think, the most well-known stem cell, which is a hematopoietic or blood stem cell. They're the cells in your body that make red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. If something goes wrong with them, you can develop leukemia or anemia. And of course, we've been able to treat those conditions, those, if you like, defects of the blood system for many years using stem cell treatments. However, we have very few other proven stem cell treatments available in the clinics at the moment. So what my colleagues are interested in doing are trying to work out new and novel ways to use stem cells to ultimately help patients through new cellular replacement therapies, but also just by understanding what happens, what goes wrong, and can we identify perhaps a new drug that can stop the progression of a disease. So stem cell research presents, I think, quite a really interesting mix of ethical, social and regulatory issues. You might well remember a lot of the discussion and controversy in the community about using human embryos. At that time, about 20 years ago when they were first discovered, there was a lot of discussion about whether it was appropriate to use IVF embryos, embryos that had been created to help a couple achieve a pregnancy, but were no longer required, whether those embryos should be donated to research. And of course, we had, I think, a really interesting and worthy discussion at the time and came up with a framework that I still think holds even today, where you have to justify the use of, or your request to use stem cells, in this case embryos to isolate stem cells, to an ethics committee and also to a licensing committee. So there's a sort of a regulatory framework that sits over the top of use of these cells. So I think that's an example of a set of ethical issues that have been addressed with regulatory and policy pathways. Another issue that I think we perhaps don't talk about enough are the issues associated with taking discovery from the bench to the clinic. What are the standards that should be in place? Shouldn't we be asking for evidence collected in clinical trials? And why is it possible that a medical practitioner in Australia can be already out in the marketplace promoting, spruiking claimed stem cell treatments without ever having done a clinical trial or indeed be any way associated with basic research? For the consumer, this is extremely complex, and I think it's a fundamental question of ethics, both professional ethics as well as this kind of challenge around patient autonomy and the right to choose what you do with your body. So there's a lot of really interesting issues that I'm excited about continuing to work on in this field. So I think a good leader is someone who listens, who takes on what they've heard and reflects that in what they do. I think it's not enough just to be driven and to have a clear vision about where you want to go. You've got to stop, pause, reflect, and I think perhaps adapt. That it's okay to ask lots of questions, that curiosity is great, and that if someone doesn't give you an answer that perhaps makes sense to you, either ask them another question or go and ask somebody else.